Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about something special, and I mean that as something special to me because I typically do lots and lots of budget sets, but today we've kind of got a high-end tribrid. It is something that I purchased from Hi-Fi Go, and if you look today it's $5.99, which is the standard price at any store who happens to sell it. So this is the Shuoer, and it's pronounced Shuoer, not Shuoer or Shuoer, because I asked Joseph and either he lied to me or it's actually called, they pronounce it more traditionally as Shuoer as opposed to Shuoer as most people pronounce it. So hopefully I came close on that, and we'll see after they put out some videos and school us on the actual pronunciation of it. So I did buy it from Hi-Fi Go, and they do offer a small discount for reviewers, so thank you guys for giving me a small discount on this one. So this is the EJ07M. It is a tribrid, so it's 4 electrostats, 2 BAs, and 1 DD. This, of course, is not the standard stock cable. This is something custom in purple, blue metallic. I think it goes quite nice with the black, and the black faceplate is sort of carbon fiber-ish with gold flecks. The shell is almost a pure, very dark, not quite black, but pretty close to black. And if you look on here, there's actually a Tanya filter installed. On this side, you can see what tips I've been using. I recently got, these are Comply T500 isolation tips. So on the EJ07M, isolation tips bring out the bass a little bit. All that isolation is actually quite nice, plus the bore itself isn't all that close, so kind of a nice combination of isolation plus a little wider bore to bring out some of the mids, which are fantastic on this set. This is the stock cable. I'll do a little quick side by side. If you're into 2-core thinnish copper cables, it's a very nice cable. It comes with, this is the 4.4 version and 90 degree or L type, so not too bad. Doesn't really measure up against a thick 4-core, but not too bad. It's a nice cable. So additionally, in the box, there are some other goodies. So there's an EJ07M album, which you can browse in your free time. Lots of tips, more tips, and a super, solid metal case, which I think just has the brush in it at the moment, but super swanky metal case. You don't really see that in budget sets ever. So very nice, package, box, accessories. All that is sort of what you would expect at a $600 price range. So let's shove these out of the way. So let's kind of jump into it, and we'll do it a little differently. So I originally started talking about the M and writing my notes up, talking about how it was different than budget sets, and I was sort of not super happy with it, kind of happy with it. I sort of felt that you still needed some review bits to it, so we'll kind of split this into 2 little parts. But so number one, the most important points for me, why was this a successful, I love this set kind of feeling for me, as opposed to other sets like Variations or Oracle, which I haven't tried. But so in general, the biggest fear that I had with spending $600 on any set, whether it was this one or another set, was it would lack musicality, engagement, and just be not all that great on my playlist. And if you've ever run across a set like that, sometimes people always assume that I have a blonde BL03, and I pay $30 for it, so I'm going to pay $60 for something, and it's going to sound twice as good or much better than what I already have. And that's not always the case. So this was, even though I had spent tons of time talking to Michael Bruce, who is the king of EJ07, he knows everything, he's written tons on it, his videos are super comprehensive on it, And even after all of that, I was still surprised how good the EJ07M was, even after everything he said. And, it was still kind of shockingly good. Even though I thought I knew everything and all my expectations and all that, still much better than I thought it was going to be. So my biggest fear never really played out, but that really was sort of number one for me, because I knew that the foundation of it was going to be good. Even if you read Chronicles, Hybrid, or Tribrid Roundup, you kind of see the language he uses. Like, none of these are bad. They're all shades of good to great. So, you sort of, no matter which one you get, it's going to be very, very good. It's just a matter of which one hits the points that are important to you. So that was kind of my intro, what I really feared spending $600, and it all worked out for me. So do very much consider what is important to you and match that, not so much what someone's rank whatever is the highest. That's their preference list. So make sure you get yours straight before you throw $600 at some store. So second, the mids. So if you've watched Michael Bruce's videos, you've read his posts, you know that the mids are spectacular. Yet when you hear it, it's even more spectacular. It's very, very hard to describe how good they are and why they're good. All these little bits, it's more than just resolution and texture and decay or refurb. All these single components that people talk about, all that is there, but the whole is much better than the individual parts. And how they tuned it to work some magic in the mids, I will not understand, but it is, generally, if you have budget sets, you get kind of pretty good mids. There would be parts of tracks that sound really good, and then you listen to the M and you're like, wow, it's like every track, all the vocals. So very much, that was very much different, I think, compared to a normal budget set. It's just, in general, very natural, weighty. There's lots of dimension to the voice. It just sounds, and I thought I knew what mids were supposed to sound like until I listened to the M, and I was like, oh, that's kind of what Michael talks about. That's what Bad Guy, Good Audio Reviews, he said the same thing about the mids. They just killed the mids on the EJ series. And even after all those guys had talked about it, to hear it for myself was kind of shocking. So the other bit that everyone talks about on the EJ series, on the 07 anyway, the stage and this 3D holographic space. Again, it's somewhere between being really close to the stage and on stage. Very intimate, very immersive, kind of surround soundish. Vocals are intimate. They're offset slightly in front of you, or kind of a little bit in front of you, but they can be above, and instruments are placed in this kind of continuous 3D stage around your head. It's kind of wild. There's just lots of separation, layering, and I haven't really heard any sub $100 set that comes reasonably close to that. Lots of budget sets do wide, some do height, a couple do depth okay. Nothing really comes close to this one. So last little bit, kind of more of a tips. So like I said, comply tips. You need something. So the the original EJ07 has an odd ovular shape. It's actually an oval shaped nozzle. And on the M, they decided to go with a very short circular nozzle. So you kind of went from one problem to one problem. So Comply happens to fit on it quite well. It works for me, and it gives you tons of isolation. But do consider that it's got quite a short nozzle that you'll have to deal with, and it's got to fit your tips right. So deal with that. Filters, Tanya filters. I did some measurements with Michael really early on, especially for him and his ears. It helps to have filters on it. Tanya filters are a little bit magic too, so definitely if it's a little sharp, and it's not going to be shouty. But if you hear some weird resonances, then try the filters, try different tips. Lastly, volume. So it is another set that takes quite a bit of volume to sound great. At lower volumes, it kind of sounds okay, maybe a little bit recessed. It doesn't really hit its stride. It doesn't sing until you're at a pretty good volume. So definitely not. I wouldn't say if you're a very low listener not to buy it. It just sounds, 100 times better at higher volume. So very much something I've talked about quite a bit, and I don't mind sets that need a little more volume. It kind of works for me. So sound. So let's go back and we'll show Critical's graph, because he actually has a graph of the original. And if we go back to the original EJ07, which is this green line, there were two complaints or two improvements that they did to the M. So one is to bring the bass up a little bit more. So it's never been a bass head set. The M is a little closer, but still not a bass head set. It's just very clean. I wouldn't say it's lacking bass at all, but not a bass head set. It's not variations. It's not Zens up. Very controlled, very clean, just enough. It's Goldilocks, just enough. That's where we're going to repeat that over and over again. So the mids pretty much stayed exactly the same from the original. It's the original Magic mids, so they didn't really touch those. And the other bit where they really tried to make a change was all this air, the upper treble ranges, the air region, try to get a little more presence, because that was one of the main complaints on the original 07. Maybe it was a little dark, it didn't have enough treble, maybe they were listening at too low a volume. Either way, the M brought that up a little bit, so there actually is a little more presence in the upper treble region on the M. So that's the basics on what the graph looks like. Sound-wise, it's neutral with a slight boosted bass, slightly warm, slightly dark. And I only say dark because it's got this a little bit of a tilt to it. So especially if you have tips that bring this, the way it sounds, the bass will actually sound a little higher. And I think this sounds a little higher than this. So I think of it as sort of a slight downward slope. I wouldn't say dark at all, but with isolation tips, this is a little more prominent than what you're getting out of here. But the whole thing sounds super coherent and nothing is out of place, and that's, I think, what their intention was. But do be aware that this isn't a super treble blasting set. It's pretty much in line to, for mids. So preserve the mids at all costs is what it really sounds like. So the bass, again, it's Goldilocks. It's not the most slam, not the most rumble, but it's just right. It's rich and has a perfect balance of quantity and quality. It's just right, and it's super hard to describe what that sounds like. But if you happen to have the M and you increase the bass just 1 decibel in EQ, and you hear the bass go bloaty, you could actually hear it sort of bloom out a little bit, and you're like, wow, they tuned it, just at the right point, because just a little bit more, your mids aren't nearly as clean as they are without that 1 decibel. So I was kind of blown away, and you just sit there and go back and forth. You're like, wow, that's kind of what, having a set that's $600 and actually tuned, not someone throwing a bunch of drivers into a shell and shipping it to you. There is real thought into that bass level, and I think even bringing it up to this level, that was probably a very thoughtful and painstaking process of getting that level exactly right, because that's exactly what it sounds like. So more isolation, more bass. So if you listen to a track like Come and Gone by Sonny Rollins, that bass that he is playing in your right ear, very nice and detailed and textured and clean. Even behind the drums, it just sounds really clean, no bloat, just the way it should be. But even on a track like a big, heavy rap kind of track, Drake's Tootsie Slide, it does pretty well for a non-bass head set. So if you want to hear it bass head, especially a track like that, sounds a little better with a little more bass. Just EQ 1 decibel, a little more, and it'll kind of boom out a little bit. It'll be closer to where that track sounds better. But yeah, generally the bass kind of goes from the instrument to electronic bass. It does both of those quite well. It's kind of impressive how good that is. So the mids, like I said, they are the Goldilocks. They are clean and not thin, not too thick, not recessed, not too forward, not rushed. They're detailed but not sharp. Very natural and organic is really what it comes down to. Full-bodied. And like I said, they just sound better at more volume. And, Tanya is kind of exactly the same way. So this track, Above and Beyond's Blue Sky Action Live from their Hollywood Bowl set. It's kind of acoustic live. So why did I pick that track? Because it's a male vocal, and the first time I heard it, it was like shockingly good. Male vocals on budget sets is actually one of those harder things. They're usually recessed or thin. There's always a problem with male vocals, and female vocals tend to sound a lot better, kind of at the other end of the mids. And then to hear that guy's voice right in the beginning, it was shocking. So it was kind of a memorable moment for me. It's probably more memorable for me than it will be for you, but yeah, male and female vocals kind of stunning on the M. Otherwise, again, this Come and Gone song by Sonny Rollins, that sax, it just that realistic instrument, all that texture, tonality, timbre, it's all there. And I think you get that on all the tribrids, but it's still kind of shocking to hear from someone who listens to lots of budget sets. So yeah, the mids, they just killed that, as Bad Guy mentioned. So the treble, and this is sort of where I'm a little bit out of my knowledge of where it's supposed to be, because it sounds kind of great to me. And where the 07M, it's really hard to figure out how they tune this the way they did it, because it's almost like the mids are the priority and the bass never approaches stomping on the mids, and the treble is still below the mids as well. It's sort of, as I said, this preserve the mids effect and coherence, a tribrid where it's extremely difficult to figure out that there's 3 drivers there, because they all, from the bass all the way through the treble, it just sounds like a single driver. It kind of blows me away. So was that the priority? Is that why the treble level is the way it was? Why did they have the original one set down a little further? Because it just sounds super coherent to me, but not if you're into a super treble heavy treble head. Even the Loke had this really extended in-your-face treble. It's not that. It's very much a in-line, right behind the mids, very natural-sounding treble. So natural and detailed and full, but the level is kind of just raised below the bass, and that's why I said it kind of feels a little dark, but not really. I was kind of fine raising the treble up a decibel or two. I think that's fine. That kind of puts you back in that fun zone of treble. But yeah, kind of quite far. I mean, just the natural timbre of it is quite far from budget sets. But if you read Criticals, and I had the unfortunate, I read his review of the tribrids, and he says, yeah, the EST on this, it's kind of good, but not great. It's better on the other sets. And then you listen to it, and you're like, oh, am I really hearing that? Am I not hearing that? Is it wispy? Is it not wispy? So I don't know how great it is or how good it is. It is what it is. For me, I like it very much because the way it's coherent with everything else, and if I want other sharper sets where the treble pops out, I can do that. But on this one, preserving that natural and organic sound, I think, was their priority, and I think they really did that really quite well. So again, Blue Sky Action, the strings sound good, they're smooth and natural, but they could use harder edges. And if you listen to a lot of electronic music, you'll notice that the edges on certain instruments aren't super sharp. On the snares, it sounds pretty good, but if you've ever heard a sharpened set, it's not that. So again, it's more of a laid back, relaxing, natural sound as opposed to a forced sharpened, forced detailed, forced treble, anything. Nothing is forced on the 07M. It just kind of feels supernatural. So yeah, so Blue Sky Action, the strings can use a little bit harder of an edge, and then when you listen to Dead Mouse's Strobe, that OV version is the same thing. Those strings are more smooth and sharp because on that song, on a very sharp set with a very dark background, those instruments almost cut across the stage, very sharp, kind of razor sharp, and you don't get that so much on this. But on the other hand, it's a long session, non-fatiguing, all those things that come along with a very natural and maybe a softer treble sound. You get those in exchange for that. So Come and Gone, again, those cymbals, I kind of went back and forth on this one. Are they wispy? Kind of, especially if the lower their level, kind of the more wispy they sound. The ones that were higher in resolution, closer to the mic, sounded much better. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of went back and forth on that one. So it's just a really nitpicky thing. And again, it just how much are cymbals part of your playlist, that really is a bit going back up here. Very much know what your preferences are and what you care about, because cymbals, yeah, I don't mind cymbals, but they're not the end all and be all for me. I kind of enjoy them, but they're not a huge majority of some of the parts of tracks that I listen to anyway. So, but at 527, those drums, they just sound good to me. So I don't know. I will say it's good for me. Coming from a budget guy, I will defer to others on their experience with ESTs because I just don't. This is my first. So as I said, kind of to wrap up, the stage, it's immersive and continuous. That imaging and layering all benefit from all this space. And it just feels very dynamic. The way instruments sort of pop in and out and their positions in space. It's, it's just kind of big and open and dynamic, much more than hearing a normal budget set that even goes wide and is very linear. It never really has this dynamic feel to it where instruments are kind of appearing and disappearing in space. So yeah, it's wild. It's really hard to describe both that stage and the mids, the way it works on the M. So that's about it. I think I kind of covered stage too much already, so I will wrap it up and say thank you guys for sticking with it. We kind of went a little long on this one, but it is a very special set, and there's a lot to it, and I did want to cover as much as possible. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.